this meeting of the Orleans Water Quality Advisory Panel. This is the first time we've met since mid-March, and it's an opportunity for Mike and the Board of Selectmen to bring everybody up to date. We've seen everybody in various places over the last 5 or 6 months with a number of successes. There are a lot of things that have been happening since the very successful town meeting we had in May, where all the articles relating to wastewater passed unanimously. And I might say that the vote that was taken on the override for the work that we're doing this year is the largest plurality a wastewater vote has ever received in the town of Orleans, with the largest number of voters. So the work of the Orleans Water Quality Advisory Panel made a big difference. And on behalf of the Board of Selectmen, I'd like to thank you all, your organizations, for participating. And we're now ready to begin year 2. Let me just say at the outset, year 2 is going to be significantly different than year 1. So you'll notice we're starting off with a 2-hour meeting, not a 4-hour meeting. And as Mike Dominica just said to me, where's Stacy? I need some help. But the Board of Selectmen voted to continue the Orleans Water Quality Advisory Panel in an advisory role. So we'll be meeting with you about every 2 months, because the kind of consulting work that's ongoing and will be starting up very shortly is going to require a lot of detailed engineering work, and it's all implementing the consensus agreement that we agreed to. So the work program, which was the scope of services for the principal contractor, was worked on with Mike Dominica and the Board of Selectmen in July. The Board of Selectmen approved it unanimously during July. It then went on the street in the Central Register, and Mike is going to fill you in on what happened. But tonight, the Board of Selectmen will receive a report from the town administrator under the provisions of the charter, informing them who he has selected to do the work. So with that, let's just go around the table. We don't have name tags anymore because we know each other so well. So, Judy, just name and organization.
Judy Scanlon. I'm your dual role Water Quality Task Force and an alternate on the Shellfish and Waterways.
Bill?
Suzanne Phillips, known as Phil, Shellfish Waterways.
Dave Dunford, Selectman.
Yes.
Jane Crowley, Town of Eastham.
Sue Levin, Town of Brewster.
Jenny Iannini, Brewster Conservation Commission.
Jeff Eagles, Orleans Water Alliance.
Paul Ammon, former peer review panel committee.
Carol Ridley, Pleasant Bay Alliance.
Judith Bruce, former Wastewater Management Steering Committee.
Alan McLennan.
Doug Fromm, Orleans Can.
John Meyer, Water and Sewer Commission.
Jim Robertson, Orleans Pond Coalition.
Joshua Larson, Finance Committee.
Gordon Smith, Orleans Taxpayers Association.
Sims McGrath, Selectman.
And also, let's just go around the back, the back row.
Kevin Gallagher, Conservation Commission.
Jim Gallagher, I'm the alternate from the Brewster Conservation Commission.
Todd Fair, Chamber of Commerce.
Tom Parise from AECOM.
Charles Harris, Easton Water Management Committee.
Fran McLennan, Orleans Pond Coalition.
Paul Davis, Orleans Can, alternate.
Liz Migliori, Orleans Conservation Trust.
Ed Daly, former peer review committee.
Dan Corsi, DPW Building Committee.
Janine Betty, OWA.
Okay. Thank you all, and thank you for joining us in September as we get ready to go back to work. Hope everybody had a good summer. With that, Mike, you've got a lot of things to fill us in on, so let's go.
We have a lot of things to go over here, and one just detail but important. Liz, I think you should be at the table.
Yes.
Liz is a replacement
and Kevin,
for
you
Chris.
Should be at the table too. Okay.
Yes, Kevin, for the Conservation Commission. And,
No.
I'm sorry, for the Conservation Trust.
She's our new director.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Kevin is the Conservation Commission.
Conservation Commission.
It happens all the time.
Yes.
I knew it in my mind, but my lips don't always. Also, I have talked to Brian Dudley and Patty Daly, and I'm surprised they're not here. I suspect they'll come in at some time here. Patty was actually going to give a little update on some of the commission activities over the summer. And I do apologize for the late start. That was my fault. Judy was kind enough to pick up the coffee, but next time it'll be here earlier. And I do miss Stacy. We have a lot to catch up on. Summer is a slow time in some ways, but not for wastewater or cormorants, I understand. So we have a lot of things to catch up on. The materials that I believe you all should have seen, or if you haven't, they're up here at the table. That's where they'll be each meeting. There's a number of different handouts. I have enough for everybody here, except for maps. I did bring a couple of things that if you would like one, I have extra copies of the consensus plan map. I didn't have enough for everybody, but I think a number of you have it already. But if you don't have one, I'll pass these around. Thanks.
Can you make electronic copies of these available to us?
Yes.
For inclusion in...
There are electronic copies, which is one of the topics we'll cover, which is the website. This information, for the most part, is on the website. And I'll talk about that in a few minutes. One of our efforts over the next year is to make the website more functional and be sure everything we produce that is of interest to the group gets on that site in the right place. So
I think it would be useful to include in Board of Selectmen packets and FinCom packets and other committee meeting packets, electronic copies of those for our public meetings.
A lot of this the board has seen, but this group here needs to have access to it. And I'm working with Sarah and Peter here in Town Hall to get that website reconfigured and functional and very useful. I know there's been a few problems with email. I'm not quite sure why. Most of you obviously got the message and are here and were able to get the attachments, but there's a few that haven't. Apparently, with the same emails from myself in them, things aren't going through. So what I would say is watch the website, because on the Orleans Water Quality Advisory Panel website, in the right column, is a list of the next meeting dates. So if that's on your calendar and you haven't gotten an announcement a couple of 3 weeks ahead of time at least, then send me an email and we'll get you the materials. And we're working to try to figure out what the problem is there. It looks like it's 3 or 4 of you that I can't communicate with. With that, and also any questions at all, please chime in as we go through these issues. There's overlap among a lot of them. Just the agenda, we'll go through an update of the consultant procurement process, schedule of tasks for implementation of the consensus plan, the priority issues over the next few months, status of activities since town meeting. There's a 9 or 10-page handout that you have on that I'll go through and hit the highlights of. And FY 2016 meeting schedule, proposed tentative dates for this group to talk about at the end. Also, I know there's been a number of things that are parallel activities that are very important to this group. And I know, Carol, with regard to the Pleasant Bay Alliance, you've been very active there working with the commission and things, so it may be that later in this session you could give us a brief update of what's happening with the commission with regard to the water management agencies and watershed-based permits and that type of stuff, which is very important to this group as we move forward. Just to make sure we all are on the same page, which we were in May, but sometimes things get fuzzy over summer. In your package, there is in the handouts up here, a copy of the consensus agreement, which it would be helpful to read through again and go through the key items that we agreed to over the last year and were embodied in this agreement. Very important. There's also a one-page or two-page front and back summary of that was produced for town meeting that's very helpful in terms of summarizing the key points of it. Some time was spent on this, and it may be easier for you to read as well. And in addition to that is a 11 by 17, which is the 2016, actually it has 2017 and 2018 Orleans CIP budgets for wastewater planning activities. And of course, we're in the FY 2016 left side of this, but it basically lists the things that we'll be talking about today and will be happening over the next few months. These are tentative budgets that were put in place in the March-April timeframe for the warrant article, and but they're placeholders as we go into negotiations with the consultant and as we look at other activities related to the program. It also lists, very importantly, the FY 2017 and 2018 budgets too, which are critical because you can start to see that decisions made impact next year, and the expenditures ramp up, the capital commitments ramp up, and so the issues are very, very important with regard to fiscal matters. With that, if there's no questions, I'll go through a summary of the consultant selection process, the engineering consultant procurement activities that have been going on. I also have up here, for those of you who don't have it, a few of you didn't, a copy of the preliminary scope of services that was included in the RFQ. I didn't print out the whole RFQ because most of it's moved now. We've gone through the SOQs and everything, but the scope of services, if you haven't seen it and are interested in the technical component, elements, detail of it, there's extra copies here as well. The procurement process is summarized in the program status update. It's the first item. I'll just give you the highlights. On the 22nd of July, the RFQ was issued. A pre-submittal briefing was held on the 29th. Table 1 at the back, two-page table. The first part is a list of the firms requesting the RFQ, request for qualifications. It was a qualifications-based procurement, as we discussed. It does not have detailed scope or cost estimates in it yet. That's still coming to be negotiated, but it does have the preliminary scope of services. You can see the 26 firms requested the RFQ. 14 firms came to the pre-submittal briefing. There's a number of teaming arrangements that happen at these events, procurements. So the fact that 26 boiled down to 14 is not surprising at all. There were 7 firms on the next page that submitted statements of qualifications. They're listed there in alphabetical order. A lot of the other firms that are listed on those receiving RFQs are on the teams. There's also a handout that I provided. It's called Respondent Minimum Qualifications, one page, 8.5 by 11, which lists the firms that proposed and the other firms that are participating in that team, for your reference. This was done basically to make sure all the firms met the minimum qualifications. Of the 7 prime consultants that proposed, 5 were recommended for interviews. The interviews were completed yesterday. The final 2 firms interviewed. And the selection team, 3-member selection team from the town, made a recommendation to the town administrator.
Who were the members on that?
It was George Meservey, Ron Collins, and Tom Daly. There was a recommendation made to the town administrator, which I believe has been forwarded to the selectmen.
Yes, it has. Yep.
And because of that, it's permissible to say who the recommended firm was. AECom from Burlington, Mass, with an office in Pocasset, is the recommended firm. And we'll just take a second to congratulate Tom Parise, who's just at the back of the room. He's the proposed AECom project manager.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Tom has been a regular attender at these meetings and will be going forward, it appears. So we will meet on Friday at 10 in the morning to begin negotiations with AECom. We'll start with the scope of services that you have. AECom will take that preliminary scope over the next week and make it more detailed. They'll put man hours, person hours, and budgets on it, and propose a cost estimate, and they'll also have a schedule of activities with deliverables. And we'll have that in about a week, week and a half, and then we'll meet with them again, fine-tune it, discuss it, and that will lead to a notice to proceed. We're not anticipating any concerns. AECom did a fantastic job on the proposal and an excellent interview. So I think we're very much on the right track here.
Mike, I'm sorry, could you or Tom describe the team, the whole team that they've got?
Yes, yeah. It's listed on this one-page sheet. You'll see on the second column, these aren't listed in alphabetical order. These are the order in which they were received to Town Hall, which was first put out. AECom is the second column team. As I said, AECom is a firm based in Burlington. Big part of that firm is the firm Metcalf and Eddy, that was a Boston-based firm, is I think over 100 years old, but very active nationally and internationally and locally. Done a lot of work here on the Cape, work here in Orleans. They operate the Provincetown, did design, build, operate for the Provincetown system, and go through that in much more detail. But on their team was Biohabitats, a specialty firm in floating constructed wetlands. Coastal Engineering, local firm for boots on the ground, hard engineering for things like getting elevations or surveying or checking out, monitoring wells or things like that, or whatever. They do a lot of other stuff as well. So glad to see them engaged. Anna Maria Frankic from UMass Boston, who's been one of the leads in the Wellfleet aquaculture program, but has worked in a number of related water body located nutrient removal and water quality improvement programs. Anna Maria has been integrally involved with a floating constructed wetland up in Savin Cove up in Boston, and has done a lot of aquaculture work in other parts of the Cape. MT Environmental, who is focusing on the PRBs. Jim Begley has worked with the town on the landfill evaluation to date, and is working with Falmouth on their PRB, and he was involved in the Ashumet Pond phosphorus PRB and has extensive experience downloading the Superfund type PRBs to nutrient-related PRBs. Science Wares, Falmouth-based, that's Sia Karplus, who worked with us on a number of the, well, basically led the non-traditional emphasis in developing the consensus plan, and the Abrahams Group for financial planning. Mark Abrahams has been involved with the commission over the last 2 years in developing the financial model for the commission, which is a much larger scale, more general model. His expertise is really more in what we're doing, so we're very excited to have him on the team as well. That's the team.
Great team.
It
Very
is.
nice.
Phil?
Question, what does AMP stand for?
Adaptive Management Plan. Yeah. And Jeff?
You know, I'd just like to add to that, I mean, what we put out is, what we're looking for is a very complex undertaking. And, you know, it's not a single technology, it's across multiple technologies, and it covers a broad range of things. And the AECOM put together, as Mike said, a very good proposal and did very well in the interviews. This is not an easy task to manage, and I think the committee did well in their selection process. The other thing I'll give short advertisement for, the International Oyster Symposium is being held, I think it's the 6th of those, in Falmouth, October 21, 22, 23, I believe. If you're interested, people from all over the world are going to gather there at Woods Hole Oceanographic and MBL to talk about oysters and oyster as an ecological restoration mechanism.
Great, thank you. And by the way, what Jeff is stating about the complexity of this ties in with what Phil's saying on an adaptive management plan. Because as we go along, we're going to find new information, we're going to get better information, and we're going to have to adjust as we proceed, and that's what adaptive management is. So,
Like the existing financial model that was presented by Doug Gardner, the town owns that, correct?
Yes, yes.
So that will be the one that will be fed into this process.
Good
We're not
question. What we're going to do
reinvent
there,
it.
we had a deliverable, which was the financial model that Pioneer Consulting, Doug Gardner, produced. We spent a lot of time with Doug going through it, trying to get it to where we want it. We didn't get all the way there last year. We've done some work on it since then to add some functionality that Doug wasn't able to get in there. So it's improved over what was delivered even. What we want to do with Mark Abrahams is sit down and show him what we have and evaluate at that point, is it more cost effective for him to take this and upgrade it, complete it, refine it to what we want, or to use a different model that he has, or thirdly, to develop a new model. I don't think number 3 is what we want to do. If he has something that's very applicable, that can take some tweaking, that would be fine, but I'd be surprised. One of the interviews yesterday, we queried the financial consultant on this, on that exact same question, and he said we always start from scratch. I don't think we need to do that. And the other thing about this is that the Orleans situation is very different than what most financial rate modelers deal with. They're usually and classically dealing with betterments and taxes and that type of stuff. And we have areas where we're going to have to come up with management fees and how to assess, generate revenue from non-traditional areas that are still on-site systems. So it's a much more complex, and it's already been, our model's already been tailored to do that. Mark has a very good assistant who is very good at doing that kind of refinement of models. So I'm really hopeful that we can start right from where we are and make it better.
And the recommendations that the Finance Committee made in the spring about inclusion of certain aspects of thinking about financing into the model, are those being incorporated?
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. And actually, probably now's a good time to talk about it. There's been movement on debt forgiveness. The state is developing a real and implementable program for applying their debt forgiveness policies. Environmental justice Orleans is on the list for potential application of environmental justice funding support. The zero interest loan program is moving ahead. Other towns are applying for it. They're getting zero interest loans. We're positioning for it, so that looks like very positive financial pictures that we were including as you're referencing in the model. Paul's had his hand.
As you know, I put together some information about historic septage rate, volumes and so forth, which have been declining significantly in the last 10 years. I would suggest you give them a copy of that memo.
Absolutely. Both of those, Paul's done work over the summer on looking at the Tri-Town plant and downtown in more detail, and gave us a couple of pieces that I've read through, have some comments for you on, but rather than create a dialogue there, those will go to AECom and become part of the analysis of the alternatives for downtown.
Anybody sitting around the table should have access to them if
Yeah.
they want as well. I don't have everybody's email address.
Yeah. We'll put them on the website, but I think it would be better to integrate them into the program first, not to lose it, but to make sure that in the scoping of this program, that's included in there.
Yeah, Mike and others, I'd just say, looking at the number of firms that requested, but also a hefty number of firms that attended the pre-submittal meeting speaks really well, and also the fact that a very robust team is what makes up the respondent, similar to what Jeff said, the complexity of this really warrants that type of support. One thing, I've gone through this in past life, but did you gain any insights, given the number of firms with the qualities that they brought during that pre-submittal briefing you might want to share? Sometimes they all raise questions or suggestions that you learn in total for the benefit of the project, even though you didn't select them.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And several of you sat through those interviews, and we could probably all share one or two or three things that we learned. Alan, David visited a few, Paul, and others, Jeff. There was actually very good information. One firm did a pretty detailed schedule for the next year and provided us with that schedule. There was the environmental justice issue came up in an interview yesterday, where a particular firm has been engaged with the state on that program and is working with them on getting money through the state to implement environmental justice programs to rate stabilization or allocation of rates. We got a lot of information on WIC systems, WIC disposal systems that at first encouraged us and then said, wait, we got to study it in more detail, but they're much more common than we know. There was some suggestions on design, build, operate. I'm sure we could all go through that, but there were quite a few that came out of it. Anything else on consultant procurement? I did a one-page handout called Next Steps in Implementation of the Consensus Plan. today. Obviously been doing a lot of thinking about this because it would have been nice to be starting August 1st or on this, but we're starting October 1st, so time is of the essence. So we've been doing a lot of thinking as we've been going along here in terms of the priorities. And a lot of the discussions at the consultant meetings were related to schedule. Can we do what we need to do in the time we have to do it? The consensus is yes, but we have to communicate closely, we have to manage tightly, we have to be right on target with our scopes and deliverables. Everything has to work together here, especially in the field programs that and work that needs to get done this fall. So originally I had intended to take this list that's on here and kind of do a more complete project schedule. But that's something which we did last time, which actually probably wasn't as effective as it could have been because the consultant wasn't involved in it. We did it before the consultant came on. So the consultant wasn't involved. It's absolutely critical that the consultant is involved in developing this schedule because it becomes their schedule. So at our meeting on Friday, that's one of the things that Tom and other AECOM folks and people from the town will be talking about. AECOM will be taking this list of priority items, looking at it in detail and scheduling that going out and making sure that certain deliverables are available when other, like cost estimates are available when we need the financial model, so that everything is fitting together schedule-wise and deliverable-wise. But these are, this is a list of the primary focus of the program. It's the same pretty much as what's on the large sheet for budgeting. There's no surprises. Contract negotiations, hydrogeologic investigations, really in 3 target areas. Meeting House Pond Treatment Site is very important. We get started at looking at options there, locations, and defining. Before we can get specific locations, we really have to get a little better definition on what we're looking to locate. What's the footprint of it look like? What about disposal? So that will be right out of the box, an early item. Demonstration projects with regard to investigation, site selection, design, and permitting. We need a work plan for every one of those so that we have a firm, documented plan that we can start implementation of. Some of those implementation may start sooner than others. The PRB will take more field work, maybe some lab scale bench tests for different parameters. That may take a little longer. Other things may be able to move faster. So that'll be in the demo projects. Downtown waste.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
May I ask at this point, because I'm interested, where, I guess it's within the PRB stuff, the landfill evaluation.
Yeah.
Because we're moving forward with more in-depth work on that, and I guess that's Jim Begley's going to do that. Where does that fit in here? Is that will be part of the PRB demonstration project?
Yeah, I think we'll do that as part of the PRB demonstration project. And Jim actually is on the AECOM team and had some good ideas about that, about the potential for using existing wells at the landfill and supplementing them, and actually doing the nitrogen reduction at the landfill as the test, because the nice thing about that is that it minimizes abutters and it's a distance from the water body, so there's some good thinking on that already happening.
So analysis and a completion of that evaluation will be part of the scope or the work to be done.
Yes, exactly. Right.
Good. Okay.
Mike, as you know, I've given some preliminary thought to the Meeting House Pond area, and I shared it with you and Al and Dave. Is there some mechanism where after the contract's signed, I can brief the AECOM team and just share them so they have the benefit of it?
That's a good question. You know, we had a concept last year of having working groups as opposed to the full committee. The problem is that with the schedule we're on, and the need to go from A to B to C very quickly. The larger a group gets, the more complex it gets. Schedules and logistics come into play. We can't bog down the consultant. On the other hand, there will be meetings. This is what, and this is a proposal probably for discussion from me to all of you. There will be meetings early on when AECom is coming up to speed on what's been done, what information is available, and what their plan is going forward. And at that point there, at a particular meeting, I think it would be very helpful to have someone like yourself come to that meeting and present what you've done so that they understand it completely, and but not as an active, ongoing working group.
No,
That would be a targeted type.
As you know, I've done some thinking about very selected parts of this project. And rather than them go through 2 months of learning, to give them the benefit of it and then go away.
Yeah.
That's my own.
Yeah, no, that's appropriate. As an ongoing work group, though, we can't do that. But there's every number of folks in the room here who have particular interest and expertise on a particular topic. On the monitoring stuff, obviously Carolyn Kennedy has to be involved at the key meetings on that, in that regard, and others here on similar types of topics. So it'll be on a customized as appropriate basis. Downtown definition of the system in the plan that's in the consensus plan. We're focusing on the consensus plan for downtown. There will be other options coming along that we'll be looking at. There's other initiatives. We'll be looking at those seriously and in detail and coordinating with them. But we have to have the consensus plan, town-driven option, clear, accurate as we can get it, and comprehensive, so that others have ability to say what's better or worse, and we can evaluate those alternatives fairly. So
Mike, this is where there will be some ongoing interaction or evaluation of some public-private partnership type options.
Now,
that's not going. Is that going to be done through AECom, or is that through you? How's that going to be integrated?
Certainly, AECom will be involved.
Okay.
There's several levels there. The level focusing on in the consensus plan, as we've defined it, is the use of the Tri-Town site for the consensus plan for a wastewater and septic facility, the septic facility serving the existing customer base, the wastewater plant serving downtown, with the focus on getting a new disposal area. There are options for privatization or public-private partnerships in that particular consensus plan process, and that's what we'll be looking at in detail with AECom. That can be design, build, operate. It can be a variety of different things. There's overlap with public-private partnerships with other things going on downtown that we'll be looking at as well. But those will be information sharing, and at some point we'll look at the alternatives and say, okay, this alternative is the best, and we'll consider those. But they're at different stages of development, and we have to have the town plan that's based on regulatory drivers and other things as the first channel of focus for this program.
So are you saying you're going to fully develop, in the conceptual stage, a sewage treatment plant, all delivering the waste to Tri-Town is going to be developed, as opposed to looking at whether other alternatives could do it all cheaper and just as effectively?
What other alternatives?
Well, there's cluster systems.
Well, we looked at cluster systems. The consensus plan was to use the Tri-Town site. If in fact there's cluster, and this is my interpretation, if in fact there are some existing cluster systems downtown that have life expectancy, significant life expectancy, design life left, and they can be useful in staging that downtown, that's fine.
Why couldn't they be an ultimate solution? or part of an ultimate solution. You know, well, we've had 3 engineering firms work so far, Stantec being the last, and the consensus plan was built around Stantec's work. And there were a lot of shortcomings in Stantec's analyses. And there were a lot of shortcomings in Weston and Sampson who preceded them.
Well,
and I'm not trying to open this whole thing up, but the average cost for Meeting House Pond and downtown, using the numbers that were put together by Stantec and which were used at the town meeting, come out to be $125,000 of property, capital cost only. I mean, there are much more cost-effective alternatives.
So, Paul, let me butt in here for a minute. We're trying to get an update on exactly what has been going on so that we can decide how to take the next steps and carry out the consensus plan.
I understand.
And what we have made it clear is everything is on the table as long as we're working towards the plan. When we start talking about numbers per household, that's not a subject for discussion today. Please.
When is it a discussion item?
When AECom is under contract and we're moving ahead to find the most affordable plan for the town of Orleans.
Okay, fair enough.
the other thing, too, that is that came through in the interviews, I think very clearly, low cost is one component, is one criteria. It is not, by any means, the only criteria, nor is it the most important criteria. Value is the important thing. Value. And management issues are also very critical, and legal issues, and implementation issues. It's not to say that there aren't options for downtown that would use an existing system, but all those have to be considered together, not just low cost.
In terms of the Tri-Town facility, has there been any determination on the capacity of that plant, or is that still something that's preliminary and in development?
That's in development. There's a range now from, you might say, a high-level range based on maybe past experience and, DEP pump-out rate, prescribed pump-out rates, and a host of other factors in the market and other things. There's other lower estimates of what the plant capacity should be based on optimistic assumptions about the future. What we have to do in there is find the right risk profile. It's really a risk profile. You don't want to build too much, nor do you want to build too little. And we need to give the flexibility. With the wastewater, again, though, we have some flexibility there that we didn't have when it was just septage. But that is an ongoing part of the study.
Do you have a sort of a benchmark of when that decision, or when are we going to get to?
Well, this gets into one of the other issues that's not on this particular summary, but that's the Tri-Town decision that needs to be made by the board and the 3 towns over the next really 4 or 5 months, 3 or 4 months. That has a lot of factors coming into it, including the downtown plan for Orleans, but also the condition of the plant and the capital requirements for continuing to operate that plant until we get a new plant online. So,
Mike, let me jump in here for a minute for Jane's education. Tri-Town Board is meeting this morning, and they are trying to figure out what day during the last week in October all three boards of selectmen can meet to have a full update on where everything is for Tri-Town, because we have a discharge permit that expires in 15 months, December 31st, 2016, and the towns need to decide how they're going to proceed, if they're going to proceed, and it's going to involve an appropriation at next spring's town meeting, one way or the other. So this issue, which we've been talking about for years, is now in front of us, and AECom is going to be on board. One of the first things they're going to be involved in is Tri-Town. What are the true costs, what are the options, and so forth. And those will be discussed probably either Monday or Thursday, the October 26th or October 29th, depending on the availability of the boards, but usually it's a Monday or a Thursday. So, and the Tri-Town Board is talking about it this morning. Okay?
Mike, the plan that we've all agreed to, the town has voted for, the consensus plan, is all based on the MEP analysis, which was done between 2001 and 2005. And of course, we know that the breach has occurred after that analysis was done, and the Nauset Inlet is necking down, so the water quality in Town Cove is terrible. So I think we need to decide as a group how we're going to address this issue when we go to town meeting in the future years and spend hundreds of millions of dollars. People can say, well, do you have the correct set of requirements? And even DEP has said we have to update those requirements. You had mentioned last year the possibility of having a workshop at some point and inviting some experts in to guide us on what we should do about this issue, because I fear that if this is not addressed, it'll be an Achilles heel in this whole development. So I'd ask what your latest thoughts are, because this is what we talked about last year.
Well, my thoughts are the same. The MEP and Brian and agrees that the model is due for upgrade, update. As a matter of fact, they're doing runs this summer at Nauset Inlet that some around the table here have been involved in to actually better define the boundary condition at Nauset Inlet. There will be ongoing monitoring. The town's looking at adding more stations to better calibrate the model. The MEP model reruns will be done over the next few years, and that's what I was thinking, that we need a work group there to look at that, the scoping of those runs, the assumptions in those runs, the baseline conditions, how they're done and everything, so we agree with it. My sense, though, is that it's going to change the 75% may change it from 75 to 70 or 65, or it may change it from 75 to 80 or 85, but it's not going to say we don't need to do nitrogen management. It will be within, we're dealing with that in every area. We don't know how effective PRB is going to be. It may be more effective, in which case we need to build less of it. Aquaculture may be very effective, in which case we build more of it and less other things, but we don't know that now. So this is really what adaptive management is. We know we need to remove nitrogen. We know we need to move forward. This is the plan we're going to move forward with. As the MEP adjusts those removal requirements, we can adjust our program accordingly. There's not going to be an end point to that. It's going to be a continual adjustment over the next 10, 15 years. We need to get the best model, but I don't know if anyone here believes that we're going to run the model someday and it's going to say we don't need to do nitrogen management.
No, if anything, in the Town Cove, it looks like we need more removal
Exactly.
rather than less removal.
Exactly. So,
and I wouldn't want to build a system costing hundreds of millions of dollars, knowing ahead of time that it's not going to work. And that's what I'm concerned about. That's why getting expert opinion from MEP and others help us, guide us through this issue. That's what I'm concerned about.
Mike, you might want to have Carol Ridley just give us a brief update on the cabinets. That Pleasant Bay was one of the issues, and we've now studied it for 15 years with 2,600 data points, I think. So.
Sure. Well, I think the report that Alan's mentioning is a report that was recently completed by the Cadmus Group. It was the second such report that they did for us for the Pleasant Bay Alliance, taking our water quality data collected from the very first year, 2000 through 2014, so it included that monitoring season. And they basically ran that data. All of the, we have basically two kinds of parameters. We have the actual nutrient parameters, which are the measurements of various forms of nitrogen. And then we have the response variables, which are things like the pigments and dissolved oxygen and so forth. And so Cadmus ran the data for statistical significance of any trends showing us improvements or declines in water quality throughout the system. They looked at each individual monitoring location, and they also looked Bay-wide. And the report is on our website. It's available, the whole report and the summary and so forth, if you're interested in looking at it. basically, about 7 stations out of 20 some odd, depending upon the number. We've had as many as 30 stations monitored at one time when we were developing a lot of data for the MEP analysis. We're now down to just, I think, 22 stations. So there are different data points for different stations. But the long and the short of it is there were about 7 stations that had trends showing improvement in nutrient parameters that were statistically significant, but that's only 7 out of 20 or 20 to 30, depending upon the data. So I guess the bottom line is there's no easy answer. Things are improving, things are not improving. We need to continue to collect data and see if in the next round of these statistical analysis we see an additional number of significant trends. The other thing, and maybe this would be a good time to kind of talk about a couple of other things that we have going on that I think are relevant to this part of the discussion. So, in the context of the 208 plan, there was a lot of emphasis put on watershed teams and the WMAs. And so the Alliance is effectively a watershed team. We have, for the past almost 20 years, been meeting as the 4 towns that share the watershed of Pleasant Bay to work together on a watershed-based solution. Now those solutions are being implemented through individual management plans in each of the towns on different timescales, but we are trying to coordinate them. And so in the past, because the towns were at such different points on the continuum, we didn't think it was possible or worthwhile, frankly, to pull together all of the town plans and see what they look like together, because we just weren't there yet. But at this point we are. Even though the towns are still at different points on the spectrum, all towns are far enough along in knowing what they would like to do that it would make sense to pull these plans together as a whole and see what they look like in terms of achieving the water quality goals for the TMDLs. So that's the process we're beginning to undertake. The Commission has offered to us to provide that technical support. Now, I think the immediate question that our work group had, and that's a group that consists of basically the town professionals who are, sort of point people for the wastewater planning in their community. We have our steering committee members who are members on conservation commissions and water quality groups. We have some consultants attending. Brian is often there. So it's a pretty knowledgeable group. And the Commission, of course, has been attending. The first question that we had was, well, if we want to work with the Commission to pull these plans together and see what they look like, we need to have a level of comfort that the assumptions that are built into the Commission's tools are comparable enough to the assumptions that were in the MEP analysis that led to the TMDLs. And so the first thing we're doing is we're looking at nitrogen loading calculations as done by MEP using their spreadsheet and as done by the Commission. And what we're doing is kind of an interesting, or the Commission is doing, is kind of switching data sets to try the tools to, so actually switching data sets for the Commission tool using the MEP data set so that it's really an apples to apples comparison on the nitrogen loading. So we're looking at this on a sub-watershed basis. The next, once we feel comfortable, and the other piece is that there were different build-out assumptions used as well. So there are a lot of differences between those two tools. Once we have a level of comfort on the tool to assess nitrogen loading, a related question is, well, how will the towns allocate responsibility for removing that nitrogen? And the approach that the Commission is espousing, and is a reasonable approach, is based on load. But there are other approaches that should be looked at, so we want to have that conversation as well. So at this stage, we're looking at really having a common baseline that everybody feels is comfortable for further analysis. Once we have that, we want to move forward putting the plans together and looking at ways to maybe facilitate efficiencies that could lead to expedited improvement in water quality in some areas, as well as possibly reductions in costs. That's the kind of thing we want to move towards. So that's where we are in that analysis. A lot of work ahead. We have a meeting coming up on the 30th of this month. We meet downstairs in the Skakit room at 9 a.m. So we're going to be having further discussions on those pieces that I just mentioned. The one last thing I would mention is We're working with the town of Brewster, obviously a member of our work group, and Sue and Mark Nelson from Horsley and Witten, who've received a grant from the Cape Cod Commission to look at implementation issues having to do with shellfish for nutrient removal. And how this is going to work in a 4-town system where one of the towns doesn't necessarily have any water to put shellfish. So
You're stacking them.
stacking is a lot of innovation. A lot of innovation. So it's a good forum for the 4 towns to weigh in and ask questions and help shape this discussion about how do we do this in a way that's fair and efficient and effective, and working very closely with SIA and others who are working for individual towns. So that's another part of our agenda at this point. So.
Good.
Does that get to his question about Nauset Estuary? I mean, that's great. About,
yeah, we're all Pleasant Bay.
Yeah, you're Pleasant Bay. It's 100% Pleasant Bay. But how about your question about Nauset?
Yeah, I think the work that the Pleasant Bay Alliance is doing in Pleasant Bay is excellent, and getting Cadmus to do the statistical analysis with all the sampling data is excellent. But there isn't an equivalent of analysis for Nauset Inlet, and really this is not your problem. It's a question for the town. We really ought to do something equivalent for Nauset Inlet.
Judy's had her hand up for a while, maybe.
I just wanted to partially respond to your question, Ed. The monitoring for the MEP and what Orleans has been doing, it did not stop in 2005. It has continued every summer. We just finished our 14th year of monitoring. So new data has continued to be collected, new water quality data. However, the number of stations was scaled back, and it's considered more sentinel monitoring. The question now is there enough data, new data, to rerun the model if it is decided that the model needs to be rerun? And if not, how many stations need to be added back in and where are their locations? I believe, and if other people here might know more than I believe that Orleans has discussed this with Eastham about adding more stations back in next summer for next summer's monitoring, and that they will contribute to the cost of this effort. So that's being discussed, and it looks like that's probably something that's going to happen next year. SMAST is also out there actually right now collecting, they're doing time series monitoring across the inlet during the complete flood tide cycle from low tide to high tide to hopefully help better characterize. That won't answer all questions, but to help characterize the boundary conditions. This data will also be very useful. And so we are continuing to collect more data. It didn't just stop in 2005, and I just wanted to make sure people understood that this is ongoing, and it changes as new needs are discovered and will continue to happen.
I think I agree with everything you just said, but I think the Pleasant Bay Alliance scope and comprehensive analysis they do on Pleasant Bay is excellent. It is unfortunate that we don't have the same level of integration of all the data and studies that we do in Pleasant Bay. That was my own point.
I can give you an update of what we've been doing in Eastham. If anybody hasn't visited Eastham recently, you might want to go look at the water storage tank that's under construction, our town-wide initiative that has taken a village to get support, and it is ongoing. We are laying miles of pipe, and that has been the primary focus of Eastham's wastewater management plan. With that underway, we are revitalizing our efforts related to wastewater in particular in Nauset Estuary. So current activities included this summer, Carolyn Kennedy and I have been coordinating. I've been observing what's been done with sampling in Orleans following the Pleasant Bay model, which is excellent. We have so much to gain from all the experience and work effort that has been done through your work group. It's phenomenal, and so we will be, working hopefully in your model. So Carolyn and I actually went out with staff our planner, we're GPSing the locations from where the MEP sampling had been done for the 2001-2004 analysis in an attempt to just determine logistics. And we are prepared to engage in that additional sampling to verify the model in the upcoming 3 years. It's a tremendous amount of work. For those of you that have not seen what Carolyn Kennedy organizes and completes, when we add on to the demands of this work, it's gonna be a huge effort. So there's a lot to do to get ready to actually complete that task. And likewise, following sort of what Carol has been doing with Pleasant Bay, one of my efforts has been to, we're working with Ecologics. They're going to be our third-party water quality experts. And I actually have given them the data that's been collected in Nauset Estuary for the last 10 years. It hasn't been actually analyzed for trends and so forth. So similar to what Carol's done for Pleasant Bay, we're going to take a stab at looking at for Nauset Estuary. So we expect that report to be coming in the next few months. So that's what we're doing. We are engaged with GHD, and we're hoping, we're just updating the preliminary work that we did in 2009, and you know, we're trying to come up with a conceptual plan going forward.
We have actually we're talking about number 8 on this sheet, which is fine, that's fine. I guess one question I would ask, seeing this from some of the activities from somewhat of a distance, is there a unifying entity that's bringing this together, like SMAST, confirming that these are the monitoring stations, these are the frequency, the types of data? Is there a group that's integrating all this such that when it's done, it will be acceptable for model update? Is SMAST involved in this process in detail?
You know, the town of Orleans basically is taking the lead on the analysis that will be done once the samples are collected within the next 3 years. That will be organized through SMAS. So that those samples will be.
But where you're taking new samples and what Ecologic is, that does SMAS know of that program?
At this point, we're
okay.
They're part of this.
Yeah, and I mean, really what we did is just went back to logistically see. This was the site that was sampled 10 years ago. Now the depth is completely different. It's not, in one case, there's a formed marsh in the area where the sampling was taken, so it's not even accessible. So those types of preliminary
I want to move us on and not get focused on details. Doug?
Yeah, I don't want to get into more details. Just a question. We heard last year on several occasions what Judy just told us, that there's been sampling done for the last 9 years. We've heard about SMAS involvement and so forth. But I never hear a timeline, and it dovetails with your question. Is there a timeline that we're going to hear some final data? So we don't keep asking the question, is there new data that's important for us to know about, and so forth. So what is the answer to that kind of question? Timeline.
Let's go to number 8 on this sheet while we're on the topic. One of the important aspects of what we're doing this year and in the years to come is having in place a monitoring and modeling program that's tightly conceived, that's comprehensive, that's technically reviewed by independent parties, and we have a high level of confidence that what we're doing is the right thing with regard to water quality in the Nauset, Pleasant Bay, and other places. What I would like to see, I haven't seen, is a document that's an integrated water quality monitoring and modeling plan, work plan. that says, here's why we're collecting this data at these locations, here's how it's going to be used, when it's going to be used, by whom it's going to be used, to produce what results, to guide us with these decisions. I think that's very, very important as we go forward, not only for our own benefit, but to convince DEP and others that this plan is going to attain, quote, water quality goals. So I see that as an important factor. There's a lot being done, but I think it needs to be consolidated and understood and make sure that it's all aiming in the same direction. And those plans may be there. They may already be there, but they need to be put on the table and evaluated by qualified people to make sure that we're doing everything right at this time. And Carol, I'm sure Cadmus and others are doing, you're working with SMAST and the commission and others there, so we just want, if it's there, great. If it's not, how do we need to tweak it? How do we need to link it? What do we need to add to it? By when, to make sure we're on the right track?
Maybe a naive question, but who does that?
Good question. Carol, answer them.
Well, I just want to comment. This is a, monitoring has been something we've talked a lot about over the years. And for the Alliance, and for Pleasant Bay, for that system, I think where we're covered is water quality. I mean, we have our stations established. We have, 16 years worth of data. We're going to continue monitoring at those locations. We did select these locations with SMAST's input. We have a quality assurance project plan that's been approved and all of that. I think the other pieces, are the eelgrass monitoring and the benthic habitat, benthic sampling. That is less clear how that's going to happen. Right. One of the things that's happening, and it may be relevant for NAWCET, is that the Cape Cod National Seashore is doing an entire benthic mapping project. So all within their territory, they're collecting benthic samples and they're creating benthic habitat maps. With the help of the Friends of Pleasant Bay, we expanded that study in Pleasant Bay to cover all of Pleasant Bay, and we asked the samplers to go to the stations that SMAST went to when they did their initial benthic sampling back in 2005 or whenever they did it, so that we would have another data point. Now, there's some issues here because they're not doing it at the same time of year and they're not using the same collection technique. However, there'll be some qualitative inferences to draw from that data. It was better than nothing anyway. But long term, we need to answer that question about benthic monitoring. With eelgrass, the state has been doing that on a 5-year basis, but there are a couple of pieces that need to be ironed out. And with a
I can hear Stacy, what Stacy would be telling me right now. Enough, we got to move on. And we do. This is good discussion, though, because it highlights, and your question, Doug, who's doing it is a key, because, and I can see Tom Parise back there, ECOM, saying he's starting to sweat.
What I got myself into.
The concern, Mike, is what we discussed last spring on Town Cove. We have to get some answers on this. Otherwise, we're going to hear challenges again and again, and somebody used the term Achilles heel, and we all know what that means. So it seems to me that that's a critical piece that needs to be brought forward.
Exactly right. Okay. And it's not just for MEP. It also relates to the demonstration projects and other things we're doing. They all tie together because we want to show compliance through these demonstration projects. So, not detail.
Not detail.
Answers?
I'm just making a recommendation that when it's appropriate to ask Tom and either address the group as a whole or a working group with our new consultant.
Well, let me, if you look at number 8, the last 2 bullets.
Yep. Because they can answer the questions better.
Yeah. There's a couple of issues. There's a number of issues here. It's agreed this is a key critical component. We need to get the right work group together to do this. It needs to be the right participants with the right amount of independent review and external focus to make sure we're not missing the forest for the trees. Over the last, in regard to this issue, I had a conversation with Brian Howes about 2 months ago now. And we've been piecemealing SMAST over the years. Can you come out and take these samples? And can you do this? And can you do that? And here's 5,000 to do this, 10,000 to do that, and then a little bit here, a little bit there. And Brian, we think in his head, and maybe somewhere on paper, has all this together, and he's confident that it all is going to fit together. But we need to have more confidence than just what's in Brian's head. What I asked him to do is lay out for us a general scope of what he thinks needs to be done over the next 3 to 4 years. What kind of activities need to be done on all these levels we're talking about to make this program technically sound and defensible, and make sure we're answering the right questions. He gave us a preliminary outline of activities over the next 3 years, including such things as recalibration, verification, and rerunning of the model, the inlet stuff he's doing now, demonstration project stuff, specialty stuff that comes up that we can't see now, that all of a sudden we say, well, what's happening here, another inlet break or something? So he gave us this scope of work, basically for the next 3 to 4 years. That's not the scope we want, but it's moving in that direction. What we need is to get the right people around the table in a work group to go through that in detail and make sure that we have all of these components we're talking about embodied in that plan. And it includes all of the different components of our water quality management and wastewater activities. From that, we will come out with a work plan, not only for SMAST, but that integrates the volunteer agencies and work in town, Pleasant Bay, input to that. Maybe it's all there, but almost like a responsibility matrix by watershed. What needs to be done, who's doing it, by when, how much does it cost, and where does SMAST come in to do that? And that kind of product, it seems to me, to be vital to what we're doing. If it's there, fantastic. Put it on the table, we'll review it, and we're done. But I have a suspicion, like you're saying, Carolyn, we haven't considered benthics, or we haven't considered eelgrass. Every time we get together, there's certain things that keep buzzing around that aren't done. We need to put that together in an integrated, comprehensive work plan that will help SMAST know here's what we're doing, that gives them a focus over the next 3 years. But we also have to recognize that they're not fallible. They need oversight as well. So we need to have someone on board that can advise them and review on behalf of the town and others this whole process. I've talked to Brian about that. No answers jumped out yet, but that's one of the key things we need to think about also. That's in the works. And that's the last 2 bullets here. We're not going to solve it now, but we need to get that in place. And I like the concept, I like responsibility matrix. What do we need to do? Who's going to do it? When are they doing it? A number of the boxes may already be filled in. Great. But where are the gaps? What's the cost of it? Who's paying for it? And what's the product? So, are we done with number 8?
Yeah, let's move back to.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Financial,
6, I guess.
we talked a little bit about that, refinement of the financial model. There's 3 modules, the cost, the financing, and the revenue. Those 3 go together. We have all of those in the current model the town has. They need to be fine-tuned, and the biggest thing is the allocation of revenue. Where does revenue come from, and what's fair? What's the value from various customer bases to different types of systems and different types of uses and different types of demands that comes out of this? So that's part of the function of the model, and it allows us to test town-wide alternatives, not only just for cost, but for revenue generation and financing. So we put out a small spreadsheet last year, which was not the financial model, it was a snapshot. This is a 20 to 30-year financial model we're talking about here. The ones we did last year were just a snapshot, but it gave us sort of a bounds that we're talking about. We need to do the same kind of sensitivity analysis with the model. And I do envision a workshop with the financial people to sit down with the town's model and actually go through it in detail. Here's what it does, here's how it does it, here's the assumptions that go into it, here's the information we need. What do you want to see for results? What parameters do you want to see coming out of this that are decision parameters? So that's the financial scope that.
Yeah, I mean, the Finance Committee will be obviously following this very closely, just so people can be assured that, you know, we're going to be shining as bright a light as possible on it. And the two main elements here that we're going to be looking at are both the capital cost and the ongoing operations and maintenance cost. And our main focus and what we're going to try and draw out of the model is a kind of risk-weighted affordability model for taxpayers. And that'll be based both on the capital cost and the maintenance cost, as well as on the equitable allocation of all of those costs across user fees, abatements, betterment, taxes, and other, as far as we can figure that other out over time. So, you know, we want people to sort of look at the Finance Committee in this exercise as a resource to test the model and really look hard at affordability, because that is, for us, in terms of representing the town, our most important issue is affordability to taxpayers.
On the risk, how will you define risk?
Well, because we're doing an adaptive management plan, there may be things that don't work. You know, if we were laying sewer out for the whole town, the risk would be zero because we know that sewers work, right? But we're doing permeable reactive barriers, we're doing flooding constructed wetlands. If those don't work, according to the 208 plan, as I understand it, we have to fix those. So if we determine after investigation that there's a 75% chance that the PRB works, then we will sort of bake that into the model in terms of affordability, saying that there's a 25% chance that we have to spend more money to make something work because the PRB didn't work.
Your assumption is the sewers will take out the nitrogen necessary to bring the water quality?
My understanding is that sewers, once built, are pretty much 100% reliable, right?
Well, that's a big assumption. So that's something.
I mean, they take out nitrogen, we know that, right?
Does it bring back water quality? Just something we have to think about.
That's the issue.
We're not focused on water quality now.
Oh, okay.
Because that's not, we don't know anything about water quality. Right? We're focused on finance.
Just a risk.
Just the finance and the affordability on a risk-weighted basis.
Okay. Good, thank you.
I mean, there is a curve, to answer your question. There is a risk curve that the traditional technologies basically are pretty well understood. They're relatively low risk with regard to performance. The cost is higher. So there's that risk-cost benefit, cost-risk factor, which I think is what Josh is talking about here. And DEP has talked about, Brian, I think, has used the term, what's Plan B, which we need to think about. We need to make sure, if we can, that we have an affordable plan on Plan A. We don't want to go to a Plan B. But that's not the perception of finance people or the regulators. From financial point of view, what's the risk of a Plan B? And from a regulatory point of view, what's the risk of a Plan B with regard to the law? So we need to think about it.
It's just a big assumption to assume that water quality will get better with sewers.
Yeah.
So that's, I understand what the Finance Committee can't make that decision, but
No,
that's a huge assumption.
That's where the monitoring and modeling and all that comes in. That's the other component to it, yeah. Yeah.
Just following up on what Josh mentioned in terms of the refinements of the financial model, I think, it's many years away, but the buck will stop with the water and sewer commissioners in terms of issuing bills for these. And I think a really benefit for refinement would be getting the input of them more directly. They haven't been involved in this process, formally, but, they are going to be the entity that will have to issue, bills under their, staff and department. I think they really would want to have input sooner than later.
I think what we'll probably do is, as the Finance Committee, invite the commissioners to come to one of our meetings to have that discussion.
Lastly here, number 7, regulatory coordination and permitting. This is undergirds really all we're doing, because at the end of the day, it's the commission and a revised DRI of some sort, possibly with a targeted watershed plan approach that is going to be customized as we go forward with the commission, so they know what we're doing, they know what our goals are, and that's embodied in their approval of the amended plan when it comes out. And the same thing with DEP. Brian is here, and we'll go through this process with us. It's going to be important meetings we have. We sit down and say, okay, here's the plan for the demonstration projects, for the monitoring, for the technologies. Where does this fit with DEP's approval process, not just for the demos, but ultimately for full-scale applications of this? And Brian will give us a clear, concise answer. He's promised no hedging on aquaculture. Or no, that's a joke, obviously. All of this is still being worked out with DEP. This is still something that is new to them as well, so the regulatory framework is evolving as we go through this process. Any comments, Brian?
The proof is in the pudding. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't.
Yeah.
Mike, just a small piece of part of what we're doing, which would be, you and I have chatted about the cloverleaf area and so forth. But through my MMA affiliation, there was a meeting last week with the governor, lieutenant governor, all there, and it was rather intriguing that the governor has been a very good partner for towns. It's a very high priority in terms of setting up best practices and what to do and how to do it, and rewarding us accordingly through these things called municipal compacts that I know the board is looking at, we have on our agenda. Second is seeking input to a group that is looking at regulations and re-looking at all cost-benefit analysis of regulations. But the third thing I want to mention, which is the first time I heard it last week, was he is starting a strong initiative to inventory all state land in the state, and with a priority to see how the state land can be used more effectively in conjunction with the towns are doing.
Oh, wonderful.
This is new and different, and so that's coming right from the top. There were people from the DEP there, i.e. Ned Bartlett and so forth. We've heard that and strongly.
That's great. Good. We can connect that with DOT.
Absolutely.
Yeah, good.
Absolutely.
Great. Ready to move on? Okay. What I'd like to do now is just this program status update. Just go through this quickly. The board has seen this. We walked through it. At the end of last year's workshops, we agreed that they'd be less frequent this year, the workshops. In lieu of more frequent workshops, we'll do updates such as this that will go to the board and to this panel. This is the first prototype of that. We talked about number 1. Number 2, I mentioned briefly the website update. Be making changes to how that's organized and use it more aggressively. So watch that as you go into it and check there for documents first, if you would. One of the additions to the website under demonstration projects came out last year after the last meeting, which is the aquaculture technical memorandum. We waited until we had the forum, and it reports the results of the forum and the work done on the aquaculture demonstration projects and plan how to implement aquaculture here in this context going forward. Good document. It was prepared by ScienceWare, SIA, and shows a lot of work there. The utility survey project. Oh, Fran.
I wanted to comment on the public outreach, which would include, obviously, the website, but I would hope this group would come up with a number of other ways to inform and involve people in understanding what's going on, and that's in our town as well as Brewster and East Hampton.
That's a great comment. You know, and maybe this is out of place, but without Stacy, and with AECom focusing on engineering tasks with a minimal or no public education, public outreach budget, is this something where someone would volunteer or step up to sort of think through this and sort of be a lead on putting forth considerations and alternatives and direction for this? It's very, very important, because without this, coming next May, we won't have the momentum that's built up through all the work we're going to be doing. So, Jim,
Our coalition, we would take that on, you know, with the panel. We certainly would, I mean, we have a website, we could even create another one for it, or we could just update yours, or work with Stacy and work with.
And I thought last year what we did was very good, because it included like the Pond Coalition website, but it also included Cape Codder and other things that.
Getting out to everyone, and I know Sid Snow is working with people also in town and the businesses, and that was going right along. That needs to be resurrected, and
okay.
We could certainly meet and talk with you if everyone agreed.
And you know, I would, you know, if there's other people that you see that could be helpful.
Oh, absolutely.
It takes a different
It's going to need other
process.
people. It's not just going to be us. It's a group.
Call in people as you need them, and because it's a different thought process. It's an external versus internal view. So that's great. Utility work has been done. The documents, the final drawings and databases from the survey have done are submitted to the town, including wetlands mapping. They are being final checked for performance, but the data is there now for use as we go into the downtown area and start looking at elevations and locations of facilities to get the best engineering plan for collection downtown.
Mike, I would just note on that a companion project is work that Tom Daly has been done on utilities and storm drainage throughout the rest of the town. And if some people remember a couple of years ago, we appropriated $500,000 to develop a stormwater plan. Tom is now able to begin to implement that.
Yes.
So we'll hearing a lot about stormwater components of wastewater management.
That's right. He's also focused on the Meeting House area for the utility survey for support of this program as well. Town Center Planning Study, the draft scope has been prepared, reviewed by the selectmen. I think there's still some more tweaks to be made.
It's on the agenda tonight. Planning board, we met with the planning board and the Board of Health. Planning board has supported it. Board of Health had no further comments, and it's on our agenda for action this evening.
One of the considerations there that's mentioned here is the potential benefit of, rather than having two overlapping efforts, the wastewater planning, which is looking at downtown, and they're charged with generating flows and loads and locations and build-out flows, and have a separate planning study doing some of the same things. One of the concepts here was that if the consultant that is brought on board has the expertise to do this planning study in conjunction with the overall downtown planning for engineering-related issues, and a number of firms, and I believe including AECom, have that kind of capability, then it would benefit us in assuring consistency as well as good potential for cost savings, as well as in linking the two together timing-wise. So that's one of the considerations that I think the board will be talking about, and that will carry forth in negotiations with AECom if it's determined to be the right thing to do. let me see, where are we? Oh, yeah.
Nauset boundary?
Yeah. Nauset boundary condition, we talked about that. I think SMAS's out there today. Judy, is it?
Yes, sir.
Doing a run that, that
The last one.
the last one, presumably. Cedar Pond Water Quality Management. This is sort of a summary of the history of this, not exhaustive at all, but the highlights. The SMAST management plan, the recommendations from that, the Water Quality Task Force and Selectmen approval of it. Mass DOT doesn't object to it. Permit filed application with the Commission, Conservation Commission. It was approved by the Conservation Commission. There was a citizen's appeal. DEP has been reviewing that. I think that the outflow of that is in the page 4, the second paragraph. In a letter, I couldn't find a date on it, from DEP, received by the town on September 1st. The department notified the town that because certain threshold requirements are exceeded, there would be an ENF required. And you guys, some of you may know a lot more about this than I do and can fill in the details, but the letter is pretty clear that the ENF will have to be completed and filed with the Secretary of Environmental Affairs. There's stipulations in there, actually recommendations by DEP that certain studies accompany that ENF, including studies of flora and fauna, historic, current, and future, and wetlands boundaries, and there's 70 days to file that ENF. If there's any other critical details of that people should know, but that is something the town will have to deal with going forward with regard to that ENF, the stipulations in there, and the costs and other factors, the timing of it. So, cormorant nesting problem is, I think it's reverted back at the choice of the selectmen to abandoned novel creative ways to disperse them. It seems to be an infinite number of cormorants, and to push toward the power line relocation as the ultimate solution and sure solution. So that's the summary there. Stormwater management, as Alan said, Green Seal, AMEC, and the town have been doing a lot of work on stormwater planning, defining priority projects, not just from stormwater flow point of view, but from water quality point of view. And as we talked about last year, while the commission may say that stormwater is only 5% of the total load, if you look at a particular small terminal pond or freshwater pond, and you see a big discharge to that, that could be much higher percentage of that particular location. So that's what they're trying to do in this program, is target that. And AMEC has a model that looks at the nitrogen or phosphorus reduction from that these types of projects. SMAST is in the process of completing the fertilizer study update. I think they've been to all the homes. They're doing the data analysis, and that'll be done relatively soon here. Same thing with the vegetation survey in Namskakit Marsh. They've done the field work. They've done an initial site visit. Mapping is underway. Project will be completed on time, which I believe was this fall. Grant and loan funding initiatives. While over the summer, the town submitted an application to the SRF Clean Water Fund for SRF funding to get on the priority list and ultimately the intended use plan for construction for state monies. This won't come into play for a year, 2, 3. Will come into play for construction, not for planning or design, but for construction, and it does position the town, if on the priority list, for the 0% loan. It's one of the things you have to do. You have to buy a ticket to be in the SRF. Town also submitted an application to EPA under their PRB Technical Assistance Program, where EPA would fund, grant funding, not loan, hydrogeologic studies related to PRBs at viable sites or potentially viable sites. And we submitted an application to EPA. They came out on August 25th to look at 3 sites, one on Powah Pond, one on Lonnie's Pond, and the Town Cove site. And they were very impressed by all 3, actually. And I got the sense that we probably, or may be a better word, get some funding for one or more of those projects. Probably the Pleasant Bay ones on Powah and Lonnie's Pond, because it's not supposed to apply, the monies aren't supposed to apply to Nauset system, because it's supposed to be south-facing embayments. But that could help us expedite some of the hydrogeo work for PRBs in South Orleans, which would be helpful as well in moving more than just one project forward. DOT coordination has submitted a letter on August 6th to Mary Jo Perry, the district manager for DOT. We've been in contact with their environmental engineer. He's been asking a lot of questions about our plans and what an MGD means and other things like that. Wants to be a wastewater engineer. What we want is just access. We're not looking for the site. We just want just access to see if it's even feasible, and I think it's coming.
Mike, I do go back on the grant and funding. You had mentioned at the outset about the state environmental justice policy that might have funding. That's kind of curious to me. I'm very familiar with the policy, but I didn't know there was funding backing it, and how would a wastewater facility qualify for that?
Good question. I don't know.
Okay.
And, I didn't know it either. I know it. I've known of environmental justice, but not with regard to wastewater funding. But we'll find out.
Falmouth's got some money from it.
And lastly, these are the proposed dates, just as to start the ball rolling for our next meetings. We'll be looking with AECOM at deliverables that come out of the program that are appropriate and necessary to present to the panel. And these dates seem to be good dates, not only from that perspective, but also for preparing for town meeting and the decisions that need to be made on Tri-Town and other input to town meeting. So you don't need to respond now, but if you want to send me an email, if these are problematic for you, let me know. If there's a general problem with any date, we'll try to adjust to it. But the next workshops will be a little bit longer, and we'll have some new information and content coming out, so in accordance with the work plan.
Mike, thank you. Just one other point. I think yesterday EPA came out with their letter on 208 plan, or not? They were supposed to. I haven't seen it yet.
I haven't seen it.
I'm told that it's arriving this week, and that will set the 208 program on its way. I suspect we've heard some issues from CLF. There may be some conditions, but we at the towns on the Cape are supposed to receive a copy of that EPA letter by the end of this week. So what it says is whatever it says. On behalf of the Board of Selectmen, I want to thank you all for joining us this morning. Thank you. I'm glad you had a nice vacation. Now we get back to work. We've got a busy year coming up, a key year, a lot of key things. We want to continue to communicate with you and your organizations. The 8 stakeholders have linkage to memberships, and we want to make sure that we communicate both ways with everybody. So, is there anything else?
Behind you.
It's 11:15. We've said the meeting goes to 11:30. Orleans Pond Coalition has offered to take the initiative in organizing some thoughts about outreach. Might this be a time when this group could have that conversation and get some brainstorming going about what ideas for public outreach might work and have received?
What's the disposition of the group? Our timing was set at 2 hours, but I thought it might be an hour or an hour and a half, so that's not strict, but if we do want to take that time now, it could be good. What do you, Ed?
Yeah, over the past year or so, to get to your point, I've talked to a lot of people in town, who say, well, what is 208 all about? And we talk about aquaculture and PRVs, and people don't understand what that is. And I think some articles, technical articles, in very simple terms, which explain what aquaculture does, or what a PRV does, or what a floating constructed wetland does, I think would be very appropriate to put it in the Cape Cod so everybody can read about this stuff, so there'll be a general understanding before we get to the town meeting when they have to vote for a lot of money for this stuff, to know what we're talking about.
With pictures.
Bill?
With pictures, yeah.
Yes.
I would agree and say that we used a number of different ways to reach people before the town meeting last spring. I think a lot of those methods were effective, and we should just think about doing them from now to next spring. You know, a few speakers at different groups, you know, some information in the paper. Not everybody is real computer savvy and gonna take the time to go and read incredibly lengthy and technical documents on the website, and we need to think about the people that wouldn't be necessarily inclined to do that, which is probably a lot of the townspeople.
So one of my thoughts, you all were very nice and signed your name and your connection and gave us your email address, and perhaps Jim could communicate with all of you to see how and what ideas you have to put this together. And I think by consensus, Jim is, we have agreed that Jim will be the coordinator to begin with. Right, Jim?
That's correct.
And so if people don't object to that, that's the way we'll do it. And any idea goes. As Phil said, we had some interesting approaches last year, most of which worked because we got unanimous votes. That's a good sign. But people still need to be educated on, as we learn more and more about the non-traditional techniques, because some of them may get tried for the first time ever in the town of Orleans.
We might even want to show people on television. We have Channel 99, we have Sarah, we have, we have 2 channels we can air video on. We can show people. We also have radio, and people on the Cape do listen to radio, I'm finding out, and you can put it on radio. We can have discussions. Every way we can get it out, we'll try to use that.
I think another avenue that's very important is as the certain data or explanations are created, that they're kept in a notebook and put in our library here in Orleans, but also other libraries, so that all of them are seeing the same material, and particularly when it's documented with diagrams and photographs, so that they become familiar, or let's say friendly, with these ideas that are being proposed. But that's one place a lot of people go reading.
Good. Okay.
Tim says.
Tim.
Well, just that we have, to follow up on Jenny's idea, we have a lot of archived material. We have storyboards. We have presentations that were given in this room as part of previous meetings. I think for consistency of message, it would make sense to cut and paste as much as possible, and only amend for clarity where necessary. And I suggest this is a way to simplify the task.
That's a good idea. Some of the presentations on, like, well, we have to be selective there and careful, but there were a lot of good material prepared, and graphics as well on some of these.
Okay, so I thank you again, and if I could have,
Sorry, I just wanted to add to Sim's, our conversation, that the more we supply facts, then the less opportunity there is for opinions. And I think that's very, very important, that we just keep putting shared documents, what we're all believing in and going forward in, and then we don't run the risk of he said, she said. So that's a real plus to the television way, and TV,
probably call it the library way.
Okay, if I could have a motion from a member of the Board of Selectmen to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Stand adjourned at 11:20.